I was the first in my family to go to university, and for much of the experience, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. There were no careers fairs when I studied there, and I'm not sure I would have found my way to them even if there were. But I'm not here to talk about me and my experience. As it happened, I graduated in a boom, so I had it much easier than most of this graduating cohort. This talk is about the collective experience of those who did graduate in a recession, and what can be taken from that to help those who are about to enter the workforce in the wake of COVID-19. Technically, a recession is when gross domestic product decreases for 2 consecutive quarters. The economy contracts, unemployment goes up, and disproportionately negatively affects the young and inexperienced, with youth unemployment often 2 to 3 times higher than the headline unemployment figures which reflect the broader workforce. In Australia, the signs of economic slowdown were already present before the first case of COVID-19 reached our shores. The unprecedented engineered shutdown of the economy it necessitated tipped the country into its first recession since 1991, and we weren't alone, with the IMF reporting on the 14th of April that all of the G7 had already entered into or were entering into deep recession. Now, it's hard to get economists to agree on much. However, one thing most agree on is that the COVID-19 recession is unique, and as such, assumptions based on recessions past may not necessarily apply. What is evident, though, is that unemployment and underemployment are an inescapable feature that will be with us for at least the next 1 to 2 years. So what does that mean if you're trying to launch a career? Research published by the Journal of Labour Economics shows that individuals who graduate during a recession earn less over the span of their careers. So that's the bad news. The good news is that those same individuals who graduate in less prosperous times report higher levels of happiness and greater career satisfaction. Some consolation in the long term, but it doesn't help you with the critical first step of getting a job. This is where the experiences of those who did graduate in a recession has enormous value. It might surprise to learn that there are current C-level executives of top-tier organisations whose first job out of university was as a forklift driver, courier, or casual labourer. It's not something you'll read on their LinkedIn. Now, not everyone who misses the grad intakes of the firms who are still taking grads goes on to become a leader. What's of interest to me and of value to graduates is the characteristics of those who do. How you go from being an unemployed grad to a CFO when you enter the workforce in a once-in-a-century global crisis. It's a good question, and it turns out asking good questions is actually one of the answers, but I'll get back to that shortly. The first key trait of the recession proof was a willingness to take any job. It wasn't uncommon for people who graduated in recessions to be unemployed for 12 months, and they weren't playing video games during this time. They were applying for positions. Be prepared to apply for hundreds of roles in order to gain paid employment of any kind. This job is also not likely to be the dream role you had envisaged, and more likely to be a short-term or contract position. It's a common misperception from grads that this kind of job is a stain on their CV. In more prosperous economic times, this argument may hold some weight with some employers, however not during a recession. The ability to gain paid work of any kind is critical in demonstrating to other prospective employers work ethic. Recession-proof grads use these jobs as an opportunity to learn businesses from the ground up and to build their professional network. They applied for the obvious roles in their field but didn't ignore jobs which gave them indirect exposure to the work they were looking to get into. Graduates from recessions are also more likely to have an entire series of short-term roles. Some of these may be awful. And while it might feel like you've entered the fifth ring of hell, successful grads learn from their bad jobs, even if the only lesson was what incompetent management looked like and how to avoid it. A small but important caveat here. While thankfully relatively rare in Australia, exploitative work practices do exist. And if you're not sure if what you're being asked to do is safe, ethical, or legal, get in touch with Fair Work Australia. The second key trait of the recession proof was a tendency to be curious and continue learning. Successful people all universally stress this in all aspects of their lives. They never stop learning, and this refers to both formal and informal learning. One of the great aspects of the era we're currently in is the exponential increase in the accessibility of education. For many of the grads of recessions past, There was far less available to them. Now we have virtually limitless options available to us, from massive open online courses from world-leading universities through to low-cost options from providers such as Coursera and Udemy. Even YouTube can provide you with the basic instructions on how to code and develop a website. While formal learning was important, as it signaled to an employer a candidate was willing to grow and develop themselves, informal learning was also critical. How do you learn informally? Well, it turns out it boils down to two things: talking to people, lots of people, and learning how to ask good questions. By talking to lots of people, you can get a really good insight into what's happening in the economy in real time. By asking insightful, relevant questions that demonstrate a desire to understand the commercial realities of the people and businesses that you interact with, you can also yield a lot of really useful information which can help you identify opportunity for you within those organisations or alongside them. On an interpersonal level, the single most useful question you can ask someone is, how did you get your job? Closely followed by, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to get into your field? You'd be amazed how often that series of questions, preceded by some intelligent conversation, has resulted in the opportunity for work experience. The third key trait of the recession-proof, and with our question the most important, was the ability to build a large and diverse network. Almost every successful individual I spoke to got their first role through a connection. There were the usual places, through a recommendation from a family accountant or from friends of their parents. But there were also a lot of really unusual places. Through a receptionist they got talking to while working as a courier, through a cleaner they met while also working as a cleaner, and more than a few through someone they met in a bar. The takeaway from that is that no one is insignificant. You don't know who they're married to, who their children are, or who they socialise with. It's also a reality that not everyone has the same quality and breadth of network. Some people may have family or friends who work in or own businesses that can help them in getting their first role. Many, however, won't, in particular those who are international students or migrants. And if you find yourself in this category, the single most important thing you can do is build a large and diverse network. And the emphasis there is on diverse. It's human nature to seek out people who are more or less like us. We have subjects in common, it's comfortable, and more often than not a similar worldview. However, it's also incredibly limiting, and I'd almost go as far as to say self-sabotaging when it comes to searching for a job. Why? Because various estimates put the hidden or non-advertised job market at anywhere from 75 to 95% of the entire job market. And in a recession, that figure is much closer to 95%. What time-poor HR manager or business owner would rather sort through 2,000 applications when they can simply ask someone if they know of a suitable candidate? Each individual in your network acts as an access point to the hidden job market, except you don't necessarily know where that access point leads to. If your network is made up entirely of people just like you, there's a good chance they're pointing to the same place. And if that network is even worse, it's particularly small and homogenous, then it may well be pointing you to a brick wall. In short, the larger, the more diverse your network, the more access points you have to the hidden job market. There were other characteristics that were present in those who were recession-proof. However, the three most critical and consistent were the ones that I've spoken about: a willingness to take any job, a commitment to continual learning, and the ability to build a large and diverse network. Not only did these things help them get their first job, but they also enabled them to build the skills and capabilities necessary to see them through further economic downturns, and enabled many of them to rise to the very top of their fields.